There's this expression that I'm sure we're all getting very tired of hearing, and occasionally it gives us anxiety, and we wonder, what does it even mean? And it's these three words, the new normal. I remember about a year ago, back in March of 2020, you guys, I'm sure you remember when like the toilet paper was selling out, and even in my local grocery store in Montreal, there was no rice. There were like very limited canned foods. I was like, is this the new normal? Is this like, do I need to be stocking up a crazy amount of food because we don't know when our next full grocery store is going to show up? So I talked to my dad, and I was like, Dad, like, have you ever seen anything like this in your life? Like, what's going on? And he hadn't, but my dad is someone who studies a lot of history, and he pointed out to me that, in World War II, there were food rations in Canada. Like, people had a very limited amount of sugar that they could buy, and various supplies that you would think of as being essential to everyday life. You were being rationed. You couldn't buy as many as you wanted. There was nowhere to buy them. And that was because all of the efforts were going to the war effort. And maybe at the time, people living through that were thinking like, is this the new normal? Is this just the way it's going to be? People dying and food running out and everything going to hell? But of course it wasn't. They made it through that. A few years later, the war was over and things were different. But did they go back to normal? Was Canada in 1950 the same as it was in 1940? Was Europe? No, not at all. It was completely changed. And in many ways changed for the worse. Like, Europe struggled a lot in the 20th century. In many ways it was past its what people might call its golden age. But then again, if you go back to the golden age, like 100 years ago, it might, they might have had a lot of rich, like, kings and queens and beautiful houses and stuff. But on the other hand, a lot of the European countries hated each other and were like competing for dominance. And like a lot of people my age or younger were getting sent to war to die. Some of them when they were just teenagers, for pointless wars that would accomplish pretty much nothing. So that was the old normal, which we got away from. Sometimes we're nostalgic for like, the roaring 20s and all those like nice things. Well, yeah, it looks cool when we watch movies like The Great Gatsby, but the kids who were born at that time, a lot of them died before they even reached their 25th birthday, so the old normal wasn't so good for them. And we forget that sometimes. We forget that every time period has good and bad. And every time of crisis or great tragedy is a transition through these two worlds, the old and the new. And that doesn't mean what you're living through during that time is going to be the new normal. It doesn't mean that no one is ever going to hug their grandparents again or get to go to big concerts outside. Like, guys, that is coming back. Some things could be different, though. As a traveler, I need to think about what travel will be like. And to be perfectly honest, I could see masks on an airplane being a kind of new normal for quite some time. And I'm not excited about that fact. Like, it's not particularly fun. Being on edge every time you're on an airplane and like worrying, does the person next to me have a sickness? Are they going to get it to me? I'll tell you a little secret though. I used to actually get the flu quite often when I traveled. And I don't know, maybe it was from people sitting around me. Like, there's always at least one person coughing on an airplane, Maybe it's because I'd be up late flying, like packing my bags, and then up early for the flight, so my body was tired, so I got sick easier. But like, that was a fairly common occurrence for me to travel and to get sick. And last time I traveled with masks on, it didn't happen. So maybe in some sense, like, this will be a healthier new normal for all of us, even if it's a little less comfortable. One of the defining moments of my life was September 11th, 2001. even as a Canadian, I mean, it didn't happen to my country. Of course, it happened in New York City, but that was like one of my, not my earliest memories, but my earliest memory of like, this is a historic moment that I'm living through. I didn't fully understand what it meant at the time. No one did. But looking back, it clearly was history, you know? And before that day, for a Canadian, you could actually travel to the United States with no passport. Isn't that crazy? You could just show up at the border with your driver's license or whatever and drive on through. No passport required. Americans, they just think friendly Canadians, you know, they're not going to do anything. What are they going to do? But after September 11th, it changed, and the border crossing became less convenient and less fun in many ways. Well, fun. It probably was never fun, but it certainly became less convenient. And that was the new normal. We lost a bit of convenience, but we gained some security, I guess. And people can argue if that was right or wrong, but it's a change that happened that probably no one saw coming. So the world does change. And in some sense, it's always changing. Like, that's what life is. I mean, think about it. You're born, you're a little baby, you become a child, you become a teenager, you become an adult, then you get old, and eventually you die. That's what your life journey is. It's nothing but changes. In some sense, this idea of wanting there to be a normal is only when you're, it's kind of a closed-minded way of seeing the world. It's seeing it as one static thing that's never changing, instead of a fluid process, like a river that's always flowing. Our life is that river. Nature is that river. I mean, even today, it's like, it's a beautiful day. You can probably hear those sirens in the background. It might not be a beautiful day for whoever's dealing with that, but for me, it's a beautiful day, you know? The sun is out. I can sit outside and make this video. I couldn't do that a month ago. It was too cold. But now this is the new normal in Montreal. Seasons change. And that's how I encourage you guys to think about when people are talking about the new normal. It's not what we're living through right now, but it's not what we were living through before either. It's just a change of season. Some things will be different. Some things could be moderately better. Some things could be moderately worse. I do think we have a responsibility to, as responsible citizens, to like not let governments take it too far. You know, I do think that you have the right to stand up and like make your voice heard when you think, hey, like this is inappropriate. For example, after September 11th, that was like, you know, that was when, well, not to get all like, you know, into the politics and stuff, but I'm sure some of you know, that's when the U.S. really started tapping people's phones, and the mass surveillance on people's personal data started after September 11th. I think that was unnecessary, and it was a loss of civil liberties. And we should be careful not to let that happen again with the virus situation. But that's different. That's just about working together to build a better future. It's not about resisting change, and it's not about going back to what we had before. Because when you try to go back, I don't know, you're just stuck in this nostalgic vision of the past that didn't even exist. What was so great about life in 2019? Like, there were a lot of problems, actually. For example, the travel industry, like we were, I don't know, we were bringing such large tourism crowds to some cities in Europe. Like, they were literally saying, no more tourists, like, go away, we don't want you guys here. Places like Amsterdam and Venice, they were like, tourists are ruining the city, we can't live here anymore. So maybe there'll be a bit less tourism, and maybe it'll be a bit more responsible for everyone and a bit easier to enjoy. I don't know. I really don't know what the new normal will be, but I just encourage you to remember, life is a series of changes. All you can do is ride that river and be in it. And you can try to fight it. You can try to swim against the river. It's not an easy life if you choose that route. And you're going to give up a lot. So just ask yourself, if you've been afraid of the new normal, if you hear that word, it gives you a shiver, what are you really afraid of? And is it based on a rational analysis of what's happening? Or is it just kind of a boogeyman fear, like this invisible thing, like, oh, the new normal, I'm so scared of what's going to happen next? Because if it is just that boogeyman fear, you might just have to embrace that the world changes and your life changes too. And it can be a lot easier to just ride along with that river. I'm not telling you to be complacent. I'm not telling you not to stand up for things you believe in. But don't fear the general process of change. Because it's through changes that everything great was ever built and anything great was ever accomplished. It's through changes that we got this vaccine that is now slowly making the world safe again. One of the fastest well, I said slowly, but one of the fastest mass vaccine efforts in human history. And I mean, damn, like, what was it, 400, 500 years ago, there would be a plague and people would get burned at the stake as witches because they thought witches were causing this virus, because they didn't even have microscopes to look at the bacteria. They didn't even know what bacteria was. Now, not only do we know what it is, we know how to solve it. We know how to cure this thing. That happens because of changes. That happens because of a consecutive series of new normals, which we call human history and human progress. So don't fear it. Embrace it. Love it. And accept that it's the only way forward. See you next time.